Alright, I am gonna spend a few minutes talking about the new Sightron front focal plate scope, the S-TAC 4 to 20 by 50, running lapel mic, and it is presumably on. Let's hope I don't have to re-record this. Anyhow, so just to show you, so this is the Sightron S-TAC 4 to 20 by 50. And this is, well, this scope's biggest problem, the Vortex PST Gen 2, 3 to 15 by 44. I'm gonna put up a spec table and all the usual stuff. I've talked a lot about the Vortex in the past, so I'll just spend a few minutes on the Sightron this time. Anyhow, S-TAC 4 to 20 by 50, made in the Philippines. So Sightron, all of Sightron's scopes are made by the same company, and some are made in Japan and some are made in the Philippines, but it is the same company. They don't outsource it to an OEM. It's, it's their own factory. The scope itself is pretty good. It's fairly long. It's reasonably trim. Mechanically, everything works. There are a couple of things interesting on it. One is they have this fold down cattail. You can flip it up if you need faster. There are some sharp edges here I wish they didn't have, but if you don't want it, you can fold it down. There is knurling, more aggressive knurling on everything. Once again, some of the edges are fairly sharp, but $600-700 scope. I'm not gonna raise a fuss over it. Everything is reasonably weighted. The clicks are decent. Where is it? Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna put the lapel mic by the turret so you can listen. I'll shut up for a minute. Okay, so that's the turrets. The feel is perfectly decent. This is one of the first scopes where Sightron incorporates their zero stop. That's this ring at the bottom here. I don't know if you can see it. If not, I'll have some pictures. In the right up, you can loosen it, and it's threaded on a separate shaft. So it goes down the turret. When you go down elevation, it physically comes down, so the zero stop ring can be basically moved up and fixed in place, so it does not let the turret go below a certain value. Somewhat similar to how March used to do it on some of the scopes, and I think I've seen a similar arrangement on an IOR, I want to say. But this is basically a more elaborate version of using shims as a zero stop, but it works reasonably well. It's not my favorite zero stop because what happens is that there is some friction between the ring and the turret. So when I'm going down, I don't know for sure where to stop because I can press against the friction a little bit, but I don't think I add any extra clicks that way, and with just a little practice it's pretty easy to get it done just right, so it's not bad at all. The turret itself is 5 milliradian per revolution with 0.1 milliradian click, so that is a little bit of a problem, simply because most of the market has kind of moved on, right? There's a bunch of similarly priced scopes from Athlon, for this Vortex here also, that do 10 milliradian per turn. In the modern marketplace, unless you have a really inexpensive scope, there isn't really a good excuse to keep the each revolution at 5 milliradian. There is no revolution counter that pops up, but since the turret goes up, as it goes up, once again, I doubt you can see it, I'll have a picture. There are lines there, so you can count how many revolutions off you are, so that's a good thing. Okay. But anyhow, so that's the turret. The windage is resettable, non-locking. The feel of the windage is very similar. I tested the tracking on the scope. The scope tracks. Most Sightrons generally track. I've seen a lot of Sightrons over the years that generally, I don't always like the turret feel. I don't always like how they set up the turrets. I don't know if I've ever seen one that didn't track. I think I've seen one that didn't track and they fixed it. But anything made by man can break, but Sightron has such a history with target shooting that the turrets generally have been reliable since forever and a day. The first Sightron I ever bought was actually the first decent scope I ever bought, was a S2 329x42, and I still have it and it still tracks. So, but anyhow, so that's that. There is a sight focus and reticle illumination. Both are knurled. Works okay. When you adjust sight focus, you can accidentally click the illumination, and when you move illumination, it tends to move a little bit the sight focus. I would prefer if they were decoupled a little bit better, but for the price, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to complain too much. It's perfectly workable, perfectly reasonable. One of the standout features of the scope is that it focuses down to 10 yards. So for air guns, for rimfire, practice guns, etc., this is a really, really nice option. So most of it so far has been fairly good. Optically, the scope is very respectable and perfectly reasonable for the money. But there's one sort of a fatal flaw. I don't know if it's fatal, but it's a significant flaw. And the flaw is the field of view. The field of view is narrow. It is about 25% behind the competition. And that's sort of a problem. 25% is a lot, and it shows on low light. The scope works well enough in low light, but on low light, field of view is an advantage. And for targets up close, field of view helps, and the feel of the image is a little bit constricting. There's no tunnel vision, there's no tunneling of any sort, but you can feel that the field of view is narrow. When I look at the scopes side by side, when I transition from one to another, where is that thing? There we go. There is an immediate, you can immediately see, right? If I use the reticle to measure, so I've got 20 milliradian, field of view is right around 15 power. So here, when I'm on 15 power, my field of view is about 25 milliradian. It is a significant difference. The field of view of the PST Gen 2 is a lot more immersive, and price-wise, they're not too dissimilar. I think the Sightron runs right around $700, and PST Gen 2 used to be at 1,000. Now you can comfortably find them at around 800, 850, which is really good for a better zero stop, 10 milliradian per turn turrets, wider field of view, and in terms of just pure image quality, the PST Gen 2 is a little bit better. It is more expensive. There are deals here and there, but generally it is more expensive. Nevertheless, that's a problem. Wisely, Sightron made it a 4-to-20. With the PST Gen 2, you've got a 3-to-15 and a 5-to-25. 4-to-20 kind of nestles in between. And in terms of 4-to-20, there isn't too much competition, but there's some, because then there's Athlon Midas TAC and Ares BTR that both have wider field of view than the Sightron, and optically are pretty close. I think Ares BTR and Midas TAC optically are about neck and neck with the Sightron S-TAC, and PST Gen 2 is just a little bit better. So yeah, so that's sort of the bad news. Now, once again, we're a little bit spoiled. We live in a world with a lot of options. This is a perfectly respectable scope, but I'm not going to be adding it to my list of recommendations simply because the competition is good or better, unless I find some fatal flaws with other similar price scopes. I don't know why would I recommend the S-TAC over PST Gen 2 or Athlon Ares BTR. Other than, Sightron has good reputation and a good company, but so are the competitors. And lastly, there is an issue of the reticle, and if you've been following my videos, you're probably sick and tired of me complaining about reticles. So Sightron did something really funky with the reticle here. First of all, there's no 3 reticle available in the scope, and I suggested to them that they should make one. So this is a mil scale reticle. It's a little bit like a lot of the common reticles with 1/2 mil steps, and close to the primary aiming point, they subdivide those 1/2 mils into 1/4 mils. So the trend right now, vast majority of the reticles out there use 0.2 mil, are based around 0.2 mil graduations, and this one is based about 0.25 and 0.5. The only other reticle offhand that does this, I think, is Leupold CCH, and I think TMR does the same kind of stuff. So I guess Sightron is doing what Leupold is doing? I don't know. I don't know why. I think it's very odd to come out with a reticle like this in the current marketplace, and a primary aiming point is a solid crosshair. Nothing is floating anywhere. So the reticle is nice and sparse and unobtrusive, except the very center where you actually aim, where it looks busier than it is, but it is still kind of busy, right? So I would have put a floating dot there, floating crosshair, or whatever else. There are options. But anyhow, I fed all that back to Sightron. I'm gonna send scope back to them momentarily. It's a perfectly, once again, I don't want to badmouth the scope because it's a perfectly decent scope, but in a current competitive marketplace, in terms of the features, is just not good enough. And I think that's as simple as that. Anyhow, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time. I apologize about all the canine sounds in the background. I just chased away a family of coyotes from my backyard. That was interesting. They made a freaking den there, so I had to go and scare them, which I did. No coyotes died in Los Angeles. It is illegal for me to shoot coyotes, so I had to use non-invasive methods to get rid of them. But anyhow, going back to the optics, like I said, I don't know what to say. I generally like Sightron's products, and I could use the scope and be perfectly fine with it. But why would I, when there are similarly priced options that are just more full-featured and similarly reliable and similarly well supported? So I gave all this information to Sightron. They said thank you. We'll go talk to engineers. I don't know how seriously they'll take it. I don't know how well the scope is selling. I don't see it talked about very much, so maybe they will make some changes. But if they bump up the field of view and put a better reticle in it, they'll be golden. If they just put a better reticle in it, I think they'll do fine. But as is, I think it's a little bit of a tough sell. But who knows? Maybe they'll find their customer. I'm happy to see Sightron doing front focal plane scopes, right? So they've got the S5 4.5 to 24 by 56 coming out, which is a nice scope with a tree reticle. They've got S3 front focal plane. Those two are made in Japan. They've got S-TAC. This is their least expensive front focal plane scope. What I told Sightron is to take their tree reticle and make a couple of versions of it and offer more or less the same reticle, the same look, in 3 different price levels: S5, S3, and S-TAC, so that you cover the trainers, the gas guns, the precision guns. We'll see what to do with it. Anyhow, thank you very much for watching, and as always, stop by my website, click on some links. If you have any questions, if anything is not clear, please let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to clarify things. Thank you.